everybody. Welcome to Civically Speaking. I'm your host for today, Lenore Swiston, and the host always, I guess you could say. Now, my colleague, Christina Trinesque, who I've invited as a co-host, isn't able to join today. And I'm here as part of a special mayoral candidacy focus feature where we are interviewing each one of the candidates. And today I am really grateful to have Cary Tarasoff join. Cary, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, and you sound loud and clear. We got to do a do-over because the first time we did this, where Christina was present, we had some audio technical issues. So I'm glad that we're able to do this again, and hopefully the audio is good. So if we had to do third time, well, that'll be telling us something. So we'll get real rehearsed by that time. But thanks for joining the show, Cary. Really, really appreciate having you on. And in full disclosure, we knew each other in another life. So this isn't our first rodeo, this political stuff. We share the same initials professionally as planners, as registered professional planners, and as well have even had some projects where we've been on together through you doing the mapping and us doing the planning legislation. So there we go. We have a journey ourselves.
Yes, we do. That's right.
Yeah, I guess somebody who's a planner has to take a kick at the can at being mayor, hey? So,
Well, a lot of the issues at the city are relating to development and planning, so I think it's relevant. Yep.
yeah, for sure. I want to start out with a question that we always ask everybody on Civically Speaking, and that's tell us a little bit about who you are and your background. Because, for those that are looking to who's going to be leading our city, particularly in the hat of mayor, probably not a lot of people know kind of the backstory of a lot of candidates. They might know your name. Some of your other colleagues who are running have some name recognition. Yourself, you've taken another run at this before, but they might not know a lot about your background. So please share.
Well, I grew up in the area, first in the city and then at a farm south of Delisle, Vanscoy. And I went off with the military, but before I left with the military to try to be a pilot, I was ROTP pilot, which meant I received a degree at the University of Saskatchewan, a Bachelor of Science. And that covered some topics, including urban design, cartography. And so that gave me a very good basis to start my life. And went off with the military, got a little bit hurt, couldn't fly anymore, couldn't even stay as a military officer anymore. So I went back to NAIT, did further training as a draftsman. And then I went off and ran my own business for a number of years in BC with my new wife. And then when things started really slowing down there, and with all this experience in development and in mining, I came back to Saskatchewan, and I've worked in a range of things since. So I've pushing probably 35, closer to 40 years of development experience of different types, into institutional, industrial, low-income housing, off-reserve, on-reserve, a whole mix of things. And in the last 10, 15 years more, between mining and large commercial developments, which seems to be relevant to the city. So
Yeah.
like you said, I'm a professional planner like you are. I'm also a registered technologist for, I think, 25 years now in the province.
Mm-hmm.
And, I have a keen interest in what's going on. And a lot of the technical issues that seem to be overlooked are things that I'm trained in. So
Yeah.
that started the whole journey for me to look at this. So
Yeah. So, that leads right into the next question that I have for all the candidates, which is what got you into politics? Like, what got you interested in civic politics that you took a run, in 2020 and here you are again in 2024?
I guess you could say it started with a little boy drowning in the Dundonald Park, and having attended all those community meetings as a planner, unregistered at that time, but I was with a registered planner as well. And then seeing the disparity between what the city really did and what they presented to the public. And then later, the chemical buffer, a development I was working on, came into contact with the Chief Mr. Wass's Bridge, which brought my attention. And I'm a trained nuclear, biological, chemical defense officer, so I took a keener notice in that because I was unaware that this even existed in the city. And I haven't been happy with some of the things there. And then just since then, it's just been more and more. It seems like every time we look into something, we find something that has so far been unannounced publicly. And a lot of it has to do with poor management and sometimes very poor designs or designs that were done well, but not planned to be integrated with other designs. So everybody does their own design as a silo and everybody's planning to shove forward their projects. And really the only one that can succeed is the first one because the other ones aren't adjusted to accommodate. And that seems to be the problem with the downtown. And so every time we get into these things, my wife and I, we pick apart the numbers in a more technical way than probably most people have ever seen before for someone who's not working for the city. And we presented things like the audit for transit was due to an animation that I did that proved that transit was failing on a very wide scale across the city. Um, you know, it's just the things that shouldn't be found that are being found that upset me. And if I can find them unpaid, just working at home and coming across it, I'm thinking I can do a lot better if I serve the city, ask dedicated questions, and cut these things off before they get so far along.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, you just highlighted something that I've asked other candidates, a lot of them who've had political experience, but yourself, you've had it in the small p way, as you've just indicated, in terms of bringing to light something around transit. What would you consider some of the highlights of some of the political actions that you've taken to date municipally?
Oh, it's funny, I don't usually go spouting them off, but I mean, the fence around the Dundonald Park was probably partially due to some of the statements that we made and some of the proof and getting a few other people that helped us to make sure that got done, even though the little boy drowned first before the actions were taken. There
Mm-hmm.
is a disclaimer now for the Chief Muswasis Bridge for the chemical land that's being sold up there now. There's a one-page disclosure that the city's selling the land and they're making sure that they now notify property owners that buy land that they have to have certain provisions in place for people's safety. That's not as far as I wanted it to go, but it's something, and it's definitely attributed to my actions at City Council because the land branch at that point indicated they would do it. But if you look seriously beyond that, I found serious issues with the BRT on First Ave, and I've heard that whole terminal that I found the issues with to be redesigned. We found issues in the scheduling and everything going on with transit, and of course, caused an audit. That hasn't been fixed yet, but we identified the problems. I was the one that found that the library had bought a gas station site without an environmental report where they're building the new library. And I brought that to the forefront because that should never have happened. In a publicly funded thing, they should have been, any private interest would have been careful to make sure they had an environmental report on a historic gas station site. And yet, when it comes to the public purse, they don't worry about the things that the private interests would worry about. And I'm upset with that because the spending should be at least as equal or tighter, and yet it's looser. So those are just a few things. I mean, there's a lot of smaller and bigger things that have come over budgets and different procedures that my wife and I have presented. So,
Yeah, I appreciate that. I want to ask you kind of the flip question that I've asked other candidates too. Both Christina and I, when we've been together on interviewing Cynthia and Gordon and myself when I interviewed Dawn and now you. Are there any lowlights in your political activities that you've done? So we have highlights, but are there any lowlights or something left yet to do in terms of that?
there's mostly things that aren't done, which is the problem. I'm a fairly driven person, as you personally know, and I can't let it go. And I mean, even the chemical buffer, if anything ever happened up there and somebody were to die over it, it would be very, very hard for me to accept that I somehow couldn't go as obvious as I was to get that provision put in place to protect them. Um, Downtown, the spending that's going on with the deed, I've pointed out some pretty serious flaws in the deed design. Now we've been commenting for a while that the TIF financing plan does indicate that there will be tax increases for the general citizens across the city, which was finally reiterated by the mayor a couple of weeks ago on Evan Bray's show. But up until then, they dodged that completely. And until he kind of got himself into a corner, he had to admit it. But we've known for quite a while. And so there's a lot of these things that are really brewing, like the festival site. There's $10 million to be saved there. We still haven't been able to explain that we don't need the festival site where they put it because they can't even watch fireworks there because it's in a safety buffer for fireworks.
Yeah. I want to flip that a little bit though. Is there anything in your own kind of journey where there's like, darn, I learned something here, like a key learning, or I wished I'd done this, or or where it just didn't go the way you'd hoped it'd go.
Well, I would say everything doesn't go the way I'd hoped it would go, but that's part of life. You have
Yeah.
to, it's push and give and take a bit with different people of different agendas.
Yeah.
I've learned that presenting better technically right off the bat can change conversation. And
Hmm.
so I'm trying to be better at that, even though I'm a technical person. I'm finding if I can, excuse the language, but dumb it down to the point where counselors and general public can understand the technical thing I'm trying to talk about, sometimes that gets better. So
Yeah.
I've failed in the past where I've been in my head as a technical person thinking it
Mhm.
makes clear sense and finding out later that I failed because some people were completely oblivious to what I'm trying to talk about.
Yeah.
But you know, the big thing is it's consensus. It's working with people to find a solution. For example, like the mayor can't drive everything, that's for sure. But the mayor does have a bigger platform than the councillors. And the mayor has budgets that can help find research of information which can be disseminated to councillors to help them with better decisions. And that would be the vision I see. It's that the mayor should be working that full-time job, and the councillors that have less time should be able to feed off some of that information that's that's found, proven, so that it cuts short their time so that they
Mhm.
better understand. Because too many times council is voting on things. First, they didn't get the answers to the questions they've even asked. But then sometimes the answers don't make sense and they still vote stuff through. And it's, all these years of presenting and doing stuff at council, you know, the odd win, but most of it's a failure. And it's because the system is a big churning mess and it needs to be simplified and a little bit cleaner.
Yeah, well, let's go there. What's calling you this time in particular to do this run at mayor? And then as mayor, what would be your biggest hope that you would have when you get in that chair?
Right now, I find that we have way too many things on the horizon that aren't being properly looked at or dealt with. We got a transit system that isn't quite what's being sold. It's got failures that have been predicted already and not dealt with. And people are carrying on like there's nothing going on. And already they're saying to students, well, you might have to find alternate ways because, could be overcapacity this fall. They've had years to prepare for this. And then we're looking at a deed that the price tag just keeps building. They say
And
1.22
and
billion,
and
but now it's,
and share, by the way, sorry to interrupt, but share what the deed means.
oh, the
Because it's
downtown
simple.
event and entertainment
Yeah,
district.
yeah.
But that little district, everybody was saying, well, it's a block either way will be the financing. No, no, no. Now they can't get enough area to help finance it. So what they've done is go from Avenue D to the river, the 25th Street to 19th Street. Everything inside of that, even stuff that would have happened, has nothing to do with the deed. The growth of that for the city will only go to pay for the deed. And so there's a huge loophole in there that means all the expenses that go for that area, like extra police, extra snow, is going to be borne by every taxpayer in the city for 30 years. This is substantial. And then right now the city's holding what, $350 million in debt that we haven't been able to pay back. So they talk diligently how they're going to pay back the debt for the deed, but for the last 8 years, they haven't made great effort to pay back debt. And so the city can't keep operating this way because we spend more money on servicing debt than we do on snow removal and garbage combined. And now they've spun off garbage as its own profit stream. So, you can't keep separating everything as a service and pretending it's not tax. This is the goal. People have only so much money to live in this city. And so if we spin it off their tax bill, but we add it as a service and they still have to pay it the same amount anyway, they're not saving any money. In fact, their taxes aren't going down, and yet they take away the service and they charge them the extra on top of it. We have to do better with less instead of spending more all the time. The old Stompin' Tom Connors song, The Consumer, and in there they say, we're going to save a lot of money spending money we ain't got. And I was talking to somebody today, they reminded me of this. And it's like, exactly, that's what we're doing. Everybody has a shiny thing they want for a huge amount of money. And if you just get it, everything's going to be good. If we just build the Ramey Modern, our downtown is going to be revitalized. If we build this new library, our downtown is just going to be revitalized. Now we got to build the deed. It's going to be revitalized. And yet the most people that understand these things say small incremental growth is the way to build up a community to have vibrancy in the downtown core. You can't just drop a Lego brick in the middle and say, there, fixed it. And the biggest thing out of the deed to help the downtown isn't the arena. It's actually the convention center, which costs way less. And the federal government doesn't want to give money to the arena, I've been told, but they'll give $100 million to the convention center. Convention center can run 7 days of the week during the day and the evening, which would generate activity in the downtown core. And we could start small and build over time and then see. But everybody's in a hurry to get this big thing because Taylor Swift might come. And in 10 years, people will say, can you imagine that we were going to build that arena for Taylor Swift and she's nobody anymore? You know, that's the possibility. She'll be Tiffany all over again, if you remember. And yet, can you imagine if we built an arena because Tiffany was going to come in the 80s? It's ludicrous, but yet that is the discussion we have.
I want to go into some more of the specifics. I appreciate what you're sharing there because that kind of prompts kind of why you're running for mayor. Is there's a number of issues, and with that is kind of, you know, you shared a bit of your hope in there. Specifically, though, Christina and I have talked a lot on the show, and you've been part of panels on Civically Speaking over the past few years, going back into COVID times, where we've had you in with your perspective as somebody who has done presentations to City Hall on that. One of the issues I know that has been big on your radar has been around housing and homelessness, and would like to get your sense on those topics.
Well, this latest announcement, I mean, the building that came from there was associated with the company I was working with before. So we were aware of that building a long time ago. So let's look at the
Do you want
city's,
to share for people what you're talking about?
well, the STC warehouse. In fact, it's the warehouse behind the old STC bus terminal off 23rd Street. And so that building was owned by a sister company that was aligned with who I used to work with. And so let's look at the city's history. They found the fire chief was looking for a shelter and somehow figured out that he had a vacant fire hall that had a washroom, kitchen, and some good ventilation. And like, I mean, that would have been a coffee break to figure out that you already have that building in your inventory. And now the city somehow, after all of these many, many, many months, has figured out that they've got a completely vacant 2 buildings with a compound sitting off the deed. And this is the only one out of all those buildings that they bought for what, $60 million. This is the only one that doesn't have paying tenants. So logical, except that it's kind of poor that they're taking the warehouse with the lower ceiling and it's rough inside. I've been in there. That they're going to turn that into the shelter when the slick front end building, maybe that'll be the second shelter because it could take another 30. It's got washrooms, got meeting rooms or offices. Because they're going to tear their goal in the end is to tear all of them down. So if they get destroyed, but they did all this already. They put them where the commissionaires were, and then they took them out of there and shoved them in Fairhaven, and no better all the time. There's no really purpose-built anything. And what we need is a purpose-built, dignified way to give people treatment and also to isolate them a bit from residential communities for sure and commercial. We got to quit dumping them into residential and commercial areas because that's just creating more crime, more havoc, and the crime rate is getting more and more severe. There's been a couple murders already around the other shelter, one directly attributed to the shelter, by the way. The other one's suspected to be, but a whole bunch of very violent crime in the area. And of course, if you take people who are unhousable, that are not in control of themselves and don't care to be sometimes, and you put them in a residential area that's quiet, opportunist will kick in and they'll say, hey, I can jump the fence and grab that bike, that lawnmower, whatever, break into that house. They don't look like they're home. And this has been home invasions, everything since. And it's because it's a shopping list. They walk down the alley when they're ready to get high and they need money and they just peek through the fence and go, I think that'll work. And then it's gone. And we have to start taking things in a different direction, and we have to plan longer term. Everything that's been done so far is very short term thinking. We have to quit that. We have to start thinking about a continuum, and we have to start thinking that certain people will never be able to live on their own because they will never be mentally able or unaddicted to a point where they'd be safe to put in an apartment. And people have to understand that too often when people say, well, you're just against homeless, there's very few of these people that are purely homeless. Most of them are unhousable. And that's a big distinctive difference. You don't want them living in your apartment block, not so much because they're poor people. It's because they're unhousable in the middle of the night. They might cut the wires out of the wall and cause a fire in the building because they're that far unhousable. So
So
they
what
have to be monitored.
so what's your solution to that?
North Industrial, like I've said for a few years now, we need to build a purpose-built modular shelter system. On city can provide land. That's what we bought $60 million worth of land, and we do land development. So we should be able to create some land up in the north end, about 71st Street and Faithful, somewhere out there, a nice compound. If you go look at Red Deer, they've got a really good treatment facility that's modular built, very much like that. And we have experts in modular building in our city. We're very fortunate that we have the experts right here that can lay all this out and plan and design it. And it's such a case of go on screw piles so there's no concrete poured. And if we need to remove them, we can do so. If we need to add or adjust or change, these systems are somewhat autonomous, so they can seal off a unit and they can unhook the wiring and they can unhook things and the other units can function. So we can adapt on the fly. And right now, like we don't have a shelter for women and children. So last December, when that murderer went back to the STC shelter, they walked right in on the shelter and went to bed, and there's women and children in there. And this is the problem when we have no proper facilities, so we blend everybody together, and then we create more problems because we're taking people that are of a different scale of need and we're mixing them up with people that need heavy needs. And pretty soon we've got a whole bunch of people with heavy needs.
This is dovetailing into another area that we have kind of listed, and in full disclosure, we sent out these questions to each of the candidates beforehand and said, here's some of the questions that we're thinking of asking. And so this is getting into the probative of that, but you touched on it because it relates to homelessness, is safety. What's your thoughts on safety in the city in terms of if you were to take on the role as mayor, what would you do with respect to that?
Well, police need to enforce the appeals principles. That was something that was stretched away from under one of the previous chiefs. So the new chief is definitely trying to enforce the police to be independent and to act in the constraints of the law, and also to have more social staff so that they can go out and deal with things a bit better too. And that latest funding announcement will help with that. But safety for the people on the street, because they're getting preyed on. And I've seen this firsthand. Like there's people, I've seen situations where there's a young family with two little kids on the street and they can't go to the shelter because they don't fit in with a certain group that will be in the shelter, and they can't go here because somebody might take their kids away from them. And yet little kids, I'm talking 5 and 7, I think, one night, and they're living on the street, living under cardboard boxes at night. These are the types of people that get easily preyed on by gangs, by these violent criminals. So that's why I want a warrant squad so bad, because I want the police to have the ability to start really actively searching for the top 10 most violent people in our city with open warrants. And once they get those 10, then I want them to get the next 10, and I want them to work down. And what that does is it causes everybody below to start to hiccup, because now they're getting hunted directly by the police and looked for. So they will go to ground more. They can't function as openly as they are right now. And also, every time you take some of them off the street, they can't be affecting people on the street. And so that diminishes their capacity. And that's a big thing. And we have to give people a dignified place to start to try to get their lives back together. And it's not in a warehouse, and it's not in a closet somewhere.
Yeah, thank you for that. The other kind of area that you sort of touched base on a little bit related, I guess, would be transit, but larger to the infrastructure. Is there anything within the infrastructure kind of framework that you see as a priority if you were to become mayor?
Well, I'd like there to be a long-term plan, at least working on for rail. There's no way our city can go forever with rail. If we go to 2 mile long trains and look at the havoc we have with 1 mile long. But beyond that, the perimeter highway. I mean, I years and years ago, I was a draftsman on the project for the Swale for an engineering company. And then when they put the Chief Missawasis Bridge through the chemical buffer, it shouldn't have gone there. It should have gone further to the south. But because it's so north, it now causes the projected perimeter highway to have to divert even farther north. But they can't divert where they would probably like to go because of the Wanaskewin buffer. So because it's a World Heritage Site, it has a certain distance that nothing can happen within it. So that bridge for the new perimeter highway is very constrained. Other than that, we have to go way, way north of the city, which we can't afford to do. And again, this is where one poor plan now affects everything beyond because there wasn't proper planning done. And so the perimeter highway and figuring out what to do now is going to be an issue for the future soon because we can't keep having heavy traffic driving through the city.
Yeah, that is an issue that has been out there definitely for a while. Is there any other infrastructure issue that you could point to as something that you would want to do as mayor?
Well, I'd like to get a handle on sewer and water. This housing accelerator now is unpredictable. I would like proper engineering reports for the subdivisions before they allow any development to take place, as a right or not, because right now people have areas of the city that have regular sewer backups. And even this 1 inch rainfall we had a while ago, which was not unprecedented, and all of a sudden all these places that should never have flooded are flooding again. It tells you that the city doesn't have a good handle on, and they're about to create more stormwater because the housing accelerator will create more hard surfaces and larger areas of it. So that's going to create more runoff.
You know what? We've come to the end of our time together. I'm showing you the clock for those that don't get that we only have the audio, but you and I benefit from the visual over Zoom. But I want to just say thanks for coming into the Civically Speaking virtual studio here with myself, Lenore Swiston, as part of CKOM Saskatoon's community radio channel. And just to say thank you, this will be podcast as part of the mayoral candidate feature that we're doing on all of the candidates leading up to November 13th. 20 seconds, final words, Cary.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited about the potential of our city. We have so many things going on. We just have to do a better job of managing it, and we have to be more diligent in affecting what we're doing for the city.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. It's been a real treat. Yeah,
Thank
take
you.
care. All the best on the trails. And to everybody else, we'll be back in Civically Speaking land soon enough. Take care, everyone.